Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 264 of Kouryer podcast. Our today's guest is Mr. Jan Paul Dubbelman. He's a digital artist specializing in Houdini from Amesterdam, Netherlands. And of course, in the full contact section of the captions, you can find the ID to his Instagram and also the link to his website as well, which we'll talk about all his projects in the podcast. And with that out of the way, how are we doing today?
I'm great. Yeah, it's been a long day, a lot of meetings. So it's great that we get to talk about something else except all the deadlines that I'm chasing right now.
Oh, yeah. A lot of meetings. We're back to another meeting for the rest. That's the life of a freelancer, I guess.
Yes.
And all right, so let's just start off with the first question of the podcast, which is give us a little introduction on how we got into the world of visual arts and design. Basically, tell us your origin story, if you know what led you to become an artist.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to start with my education, which was film here in the Netherlands. It's not a very it was not a very high level school, but it did allow me did give me a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do and to experiment with all of these programs. So we had a teacher who was teaching After Effects, and after I saw that, I thought I can do a lot more with this than my teacher is teaching me. So I started to teach myself. And from that, I was able to get an internship while I was studying for a studio here in Amsterdam. And they were doing 3D. And to get into that internship, I had to know some 3D. So I had to teach myself. I think at that time I used Maya. That's a long time ago. And after that internship, I started my freelance career. That's about 13 years ago now, so it's quite a long time. But what is interesting, I think, that a lot of people will go through that is that, what do you call yourself? And in the beginning, I just called myself a 3D animator. And by that, I meant just please give me a job. Like, I can do anything, just give it to me. But after a while, I figured out is that what I'm really good at is to take responsibility for a certain part of a project. And if you are a 3D animator, you want to work with a team of other artists or other animators. And I didn't really feel like that. I wanted to have shorter, more interesting, shorter and more engaging projects that started off really exciting, but then also finished quite quickly. And with that, I got into the world of design. So after that, I called myself a 3D designer. For about 5 years, I think I helped 2D designers if they needed 3D. I made some websites. I did a lot of branding. But I got a project there for the Dutch government. This is a couple of years ago. And there I was able to tell the whole story with the 3D tools that I was using for branding. But this needed to be a more emotional story. And I had a lot of space there to do my own thing. And it's a very nice animation. But what was most important then is that I had that first touch of creating a little bit more emotion than just, it has to look nice. And from that then on, I was slowly but surely transitioning more into a personal style. And what I call myself now is a digital artist. And the reason why I call myself an artist is twofold. On the one hand is that I have a certain style that I really like. But on the other hand, it's also that I want to create a certain distance with me and my clients, where I want them to hire me specifically because they want to have a different experience than what they're used to. And also I want to tell them I can take responsibility of this part of the project. So, and responsibility goes both ways, right? So on the one hand, they trust me because I'm really good, hopefully. But on the other hand, if you start to doubt someone that you trust, the trust also breaks. So I want them to completely trust me, and then I can perform best. And calling yourself an artist is one way to sort of get that culture into your work. So 3D digital artist right now.
All right, awesome. And well, you mentioned that you kind of define yourself as a digital artist, but a lot of your works, and for anyone who's watching on YouTube, you can see the reel above us right now, above our heads, that's showing his works. You do a lot of what was the name of the term? I forgot. Generative artwork. Is that the name? I kind of forgot the actual term of it.
Yeah,
Procedural.
Procedural.
Yes,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
A lot of procedural artwork in Houdini, and well, what I'm basically trying to ask right now, sure, you're a digital artist, but your main branch of design that you're focusing on is procedural art in Houdini. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so the reason why I used Houdini, and this is also a turning point in my career, and I think a lot of people who used Houdini, especially if they have a few years before in Cinema 4D or in Blender or in Maya or 3ds Max, it's just a different way of thinking about your work. I think a lot of freelance artists are used to that people call them, and then you do a project together, and everything might go really well. But after that, all the tools that you've built are not very reusable. You might have a beautiful keyframed animation of a very simple shape that, you know, it takes a lot of time to get there. But after that, the project goes away, or you have to start over. And I decided that I didn't want to start over. I wanted to really own the style that I'm looking for, and Houdini is the way to do that, where you can create this procedural animation, procedural models, procedural everything basically, and that just felt like a good fit with where I wanted to go with my career. And I'm very happy I did. It did take me 2 years though before I could call myself a real, professional. Well, I guess after about a year, I was freelancing in it, but after 2 years, I was able to, really own the whole process and take on very different projects. Like one good example, for instance, is that a while ago, I was able to do a drone show. Like 1,000 drones flying in the sky, and they have to have different colors, and it has to work, and the drones shouldn't hit each other. And you can do all of that in Cinema 4D and 3ds Max. It's basically a point cloud animation. But the thing about Houdini is that you can create these tools that work together um, procedurally. It's like the drones cannot touch each other, and they can only go a certain speed. And one shape has to morph into another shape, but they still need to keep the same amount of drones, right, in the real world. And all of those things you can control in Houdini. So the same systems that get me to the 3D renders that I'm going for also allow me to do things like that, or move that over to a game engine. And I really like that feeling of creating a system and creating a sustainable tool set that you're able to build throughout your career.
All
Yeah.
right. Like you mentioned the drone show. Do you mean like in a 3D, like, of course in Houdini, or did you kind of apply that in an actual drone show?
Yeah. For during Burning Man, there were three
Wow.
shows that this company did, and I was able to do the B shows that were still really nice. It's not the one that's in the newspaper, but the other shows around that. And for them, it was quite a risk because usually they work together with quite a large company who was able to make a very custom show. And what I offered them as a service was to create these tools that they can then again build on later. So it took a while to get to those tools, but I can very confidently say that I can make those drone shows fly, and they will work, and they will be sustainable to, let's say, adjust that show a little bit in the future. You can throw in any logo and it's going to fly, but you can also throw in a 3D object and it's going to fly as well. And I really like that feeling about these drone shows where, okay, there's no rendering, but the things do have to actually fly, and that's the real test. So there's no subjective thing there. If the drones don't take off, that means the show is ruined, and that I like that pressure as well. And Houdini has always been very dependable in
So
that.
you can do a lot of programming stuff in Houdini as well for that.
It's actually
Scripts.
I don't use any of that. I mean, a little bit, but it's very basic. I don't have a programming background. I do have some intuition about what I want the program to do. So sometimes I need to have a little bit of code to sort of specifically do what I want. But it's a lot more working with the tools that are there already. And yeah, and like again, building this intuition about what will work and what won't work. And yeah, so I do use some programming, but when I'm teaching about Houdini, for instance, I try to avoid all of that. It shouldn't be that you need a science or like a computer science background to use Houdini. And yeah, I'm not a very good coder.
All right.
Yeah.
And but I guess right now, like, have you tried using ChatGPT for the coding parts of your stuff?
Yeah, the problem with ChatGPT and coding in Houdini is that even though I would love to use it, is that right now there's not enough training data in the Houdini script. There's Python. I guess that would work, but I am not sufficiently educated in Python. But like in Houdini's own script, Vex, There's not enough training data to dependably use it. You will get into that situation where, so I tried that. So I went to, I have a dot and I want this attribute from the dot to expand to the shapes around it organically. It gives you something. It kind of sort of works, but especially um, it's a good, no, it's not practical. It'll get there, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, like because recently for some components for a game in Unity that I was trying to make, I
Yeah.
used ChatGPT, and the accuracy was around. To be honest, it depends on the complexity of the script. Was around
Mm-hmm.
85-90%. Like rare times
It's great.
100%. Like
Yeah.
by accuracy, I mean like you have to tweak a bunch of things to for it to actually do the thing that you tell ChatGPT to do. But all in all, it's getting there. It's getting there.
Oh, yeah,
Like
absolutely.
it's going to be scary. Like because I knew someone who with ChatGPT made like a add-on for Blender Unreal workflow and stuff like that with just just some prompts. It's kind of
I
scary.
mean,
Like
well,
we as artists are kind of afraid of AI. You have to realize coders are having it way worse.
yeah. Well, coding, the coders have a text-based input and a text-based output, and this is why it's very quick. They will be very quick to adapt to this new tool. And yeah, so let's talk about that word, scary, scared. So I have a very allergic reaction when people say that they're scared about something, especially in their own professional life. So this is a big thing for me, is that I split myself in half. And I do this very consciously, where I have a personal side and I have a professional side. This might be just my personality trait, but what are we talking about here? Are we talking about our professional life? Because if you're scared in your professional life, then you have to, readjust your way of thinking about it. Because new changes are supposed to sort of push you into action. So if you're professionally scared, I would suggest engaging with AI as much as you can, or at least, put an hour in it once in a while to just check out what ChatGPT is up to or what Sora is, where it's going. But you shouldn't be afraid of it, because the moment that you tell yourself, I'm scared, you're going to not do something. It's like, it'll stop you from engaging with it. Personally, and you're scared, that's great. We can have a conversation about that. It's not great. Must be very uncomfortable. But that's a different kind of conversation. Professionally, it's a tool that you should investigate. And I mean that in the same way that when I was doing 3D in the beginning, we were using V-Ray. And V-Ray is a beautiful renderer. Some people still use it. But now I think most of your listeners will be either using Blender's Eevee or the other one. Excuse
Cycles.
me. Or Cycles, right? Or you're using Redshift, like me, or you're using Octane. And I remember when those GPU renderers came out, everyone was using Mac when I just got started. And then after that, suddenly everyone wanted to have the fastest GPU, because it just completely changed the game about how you engage with your renders. It was much more interactive, much quicker, and the quality suddenly shot up through the roof. And at that time, there were many people who said, yeah, but Redshift is just, or like Octane especially, like Octane has a look. Everyone said that Octane has a certain look. And so this is, again, if you split yourself in half, like personally, you might say, okay, this has a look, that's fine. But professionally, if you say this has a look and that's why I don't want to learn that, you're going to be left behind anyway. Because V-Ray has a very realistic look. Arnold has a very realistic look. But Octane had a sort of vibe that people didn't really like. But our clients don't give a fuck about that. They just want you to perform. They want you to create very high quality work that they can be proud of. And with AI, it's going to be a similar thing, where personally you might have doubts and questions, and you might be scared that you're not going to have as many jobs, and that's fine. But professionally, you have to engage with it, because you're going to be left behind if you don't engage with it.
Yeah,
So I do,
definitely agree with that.
by
Yeah,
the way.
it's better to just be familiar with it rather than not, especially with all the changes that's coming. It's kind of nonsensical to not, to ignore it actually.
But it's like, don't let your fear stop you from trying something.
Yep.
I have so much. I see so many amazing artists around me all the time, and I always feel like they have so many opportunities to develop themselves. And I'm not saying you have to use AI in your career. You can do it. You can do what you want, but do that out of a conscious decision, not out of fear. So if you say AI, it's not my style because I want to sculpt everything myself because I believe it has a certain human touch, that's great. But don't do it out of fear. Try it first and then decide if you want to use it or not.
Oh yeah, definitely agree with that. And
Yeah.
how does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a new project? Basically, what does the structure of your pipeline look like?
Um, well, since I'm an artist, it changed a lot. I So, for instance, I don't make storyboards or the standard pipeline that I excuse me, the standard pipeline that I used before, where it has a certain amount of steps to get somewhere. That is basically not relevant to the type of work I want to make right now. So Houdini's procedural systems make it so that I'm looking for I like to call them elements. I'm looking for certain elements, and that can show itself in the animation. It can show itself in the models, or it can show itself in the rendering. Usually, it's a combination between those things. So what I do is that when I get a client, I make a mood board, but much more moody than most mood boards, where I'm really trying to capture a certain vibe, but the pictures might not make sense to most people, but for me, they will make sense. So yeah, and then I just in Houdini start to get to that feeling. Usually my work is very quiet, very relaxed, very chill, and that's usually a good start off point. So what is the slowest version of an explosion you can make without it losing the feeling of explosion? Those are the type of questions that I'm looking for. And so yeah, a lot of procedural systems. It can be fluid animations or it can be just interesting models. I like to make a lot of flowers and plants, so getting a lot of inspiration about how those might grow in real life and then try to recreate that in Houdini. One of my things is I really hate it when flowers intersect with each other or any models. So I don't like it when there's like polygons pushing through each other or yeah, I have a huge allergy to that. And also to make my life even worse is that I don't use any pre-made assets or textures. So everything I make, I want to create systems to build that. So when I get a client, that's how it works. I just keep creating systems until we're at a space that we're all happy with, and then finalize that. But it's a
All
very
right.
dynamic process. It's not like planning, designing that, like doing the plan and then finishing. Like even the rendering. Right now, I have a client. I think I made about 70 frames already for the style of their new website. That's part of the process. It's sort of fun, and eventually we're going to say. So the way when the stress starts to happen is when I tell the client we have to get to version one. So what does that mean for us? Does that mean choosing the first frame we made, or does that mean that we want to go like this or go like that? But it's a very sort of emotional process. And again, I take the responsibility in those projects. So I basically can do whatever I want. The quality is going to be there anyway.
All right. And adding to this question, have you ever
Mhm.
used your dreams as inspirations for your works? Any elements from your dreams, maybe? And you woke up and you suddenly like, wait, I need to quickly sketch that thing idea out so I can use it later.
Oh, it's an interesting question. I don't know if I would use my dreams directly, but um, I usually get it in the shower. I don't know if I'm the only one, but
Oh, you're not the only one. Those shower thoughts, yeah.
yeah. So I try to have like a lot of inputs in my during my day, all kind of different ideas. You can listen to a podcast and then you have this idea, or you can watch a movie and you get an idea, and I sort of let them exist in the background, and then there are these certain catalyzing moments. So like shower is one, but also at the start of the day when I make a list about the things I want to do, suddenly those ideas come up and they connect themselves. But no, not necessarily for my dreams, although an AI that would scan my dreams and then put that into an order that I might be able to understand, that would be good. It would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think we're really far from that tech, but I think it's doable. We're a couple of decades away actually from getting our dreams translated.
I don't. So this is. I was I was at a meeting a couple of days ago, and we were talking about the future of AI. And again, I said at that time I said, please let's never say that again. We like it'll take a long time, or this will never happen. Like those kind of things, because remember 1 year ago, I think most of your listeners, and me included, thought that Mid-Journey was just like a weird thing in the background, and now it's a real process that a lot of studios go through to get ideas. And now you have Sora, which might replace people, but it will definitely be a tool that I would be using to kind of get to a certain vibe. So it's going really fast. I don't know about what kind of future you're imagining with the dreams, but I do think that faster than we expect, we will have something that resembles our dreams being visualized.
No, I mean what I mean by that, like I mean, of course, um, I'm trying to assume and guess by like basically, I don't think a project like that will get budgets anytime soon. Like what it would dream wants, but for example, a project that might replace a lot of like artists, that's going to get a lot of budget to get it up and running, and it's doable, and the tech is there, more than
Well,
ready.
you have to ask yourself. So what AI is really good at is to replace repetitive tasks. So what is so I believe that most motion design projects are filled with repetitive tasks. Creating a storyboard or editing or all of this stuff, you do it every time, every project, and AI is very good at making those things faster. So the whole at the start, for instance, the ideation moment where you open Pinterest or whatever you like, or you have like a whole book of art that you like, those things are repeated every time. And I think that machine learning is very good at making that stuff more fluid and more interesting, or more interactive. So right now, for instance, Pinterest is a very good example, because when I look at my mood boards, and I've been using Pinterest for years, when I'm looking at my mood boards, even though I saved a lot and a lot of different boards, I still feel like I keep finding the same things. That's not because there's not a lot of not enough. Sorry, that's not because there's not enough content on Pinterest, but it's because the curation, let's say the algorithmic curation of Pinterest, makes it that certain trends score way higher. For instance, I never see any Indian 3D art on Pinterest, and I never see any, African graphic design on Pinterest. So there are so many things that you're not seeing, but that have been created, and machine learning is much better at sort of putting all of that together. So what you will be seeing won't be an actual human creation, but it will be like an average of different human creations, which for your ideas will be very valuable.
All right, and yeah, basically about the AI thing with the dream translation project thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the reason I say it's going to take a while, as I mentioned before, it's because it's about funding. You know, like because if listen, I think if a project like that gets huge funding, it can be possible in a couple of months. It's all about funding, you know, because the tech, the workforce, the brains to do that are we already have it right now in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the pseudo code solution to this whole thing is just a way to translate the just the neuron the way neurons are, just sparkling in the brain into ones and zeros, and that's how you can translate the rest of it into audio and visual, uh, just imagery at the end of it in the most basic sense possible. I'm sure I'm probably messing something up here big time. I'm not a very tech savvy. I'm not a professional at all, but this is
Mm-hmm.
from my very pop science information that I understand.
Oh yeah. Well, pop science will tell you that we will have those things very quickly. That I am, uh, the only thing I'm worried about, let's say, is that we will take a certain version of of what they will tell us our brain sees, that we will take that as the ultimate truth, and that around that a lot of things will pop up. So if we are able to scan our dreams, and then it will have a certain visual representation, to get there, it's not an infinite number of. So you're translating like an emotional thought into a 2D version, right? Or maybe a 3D version. And I don't think that that will be a real representation of the emotions you have. So let's say you dream and about something like, maybe I've seen it before, like you have a dream where your tooth falls out. Have you ever heard about that?
I had never had that, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, I've had that. It's a very strange feeling. You're just walking through your dream and everything is fine, and you're talking to someone, and you see in the reflection of something that your teeth are falling out. And so there's a difference between you feeling that it really happened to you and seeing a representation of that happening to you. It's not the same feeling. So we will probably be at a visual representation of our dreams and thoughts quite quickly, but it will not be the same thing as our emotions. And that doesn't mean that but I still think that that technology is very valuable and very interesting, definitely. But yeah, in the end, the question is, do we really want to replace these emotions, or are we looking for sort of analogs to feel a certain way? Which is also in my work. The reason why I like to use flowers and very natural elements is because I want my work to feel the same everywhere in the world. If you show a flower to someone in the Netherlands, or someone in Japan, or someone in, I don't know, Syria, I don't know, you choose a country, people will have a very similar feeling towards it. And that's a thought that in the future will be much more interesting, where there are many icons that we look at every day that only mean something to a certain culture, or they might mean something very different in different cultures. The color of white in the Netherlands or in the West is, thinking about clean or calm, but in China it means death. So those are interesting topics for me. It's like, how can you play with that, or how can you use that in your work to get to a certain emotion, and does it matter where you show your work? And so those are things that in the future will become much more exciting when we are able to keep sharing our ideas. And I think the machine learning will allow people who are right now not represented in the sort of visual library to also add to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very excited about that.
That's awesome. And who are some of your favorite artists and designers that have inspired you the most?
Well, it's hard to say specific names, because the moment that you start to really like an artist, you will be more interested in his or her personality, than in the art, which that always happens to me, is that I might. So, for instance, Bill Ellis, he's a very good example. His work is amazing, but not but. And a while ago, I think he bought my first NFT. This is a long time ago. So he bought my NFT, and at that time we sort of immediately had a personal connection, and you start to appreciate that person in a very different way. So you might like someone's art a lot, but his or her personality might click with you, and then you're more interested in the person, or it might not click with you, or they're not engaged, or you're not able to engage with them, and then then it just becomes more content. So I'm mostly inspired by traditional art, romanticism, where it's people trying to make the most beautiful version of something, but to reduce that to a certain amount of artists will be difficult. I guess maybe Dali. Dali is a pretty good choice, but contemporarily, I'm not so sure. I don't have any specific names that come up when you ask me that.
All right, fair enough. And what are you working on right now that you can tell us about? What kind of project it is? Like, I mean, of course, if Andy is already involved, we can skip right past this question, but that's not the case. Could you tell us a little bit of what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I've just traveled to Asia. We talked about it before the podcast started, but I was in South Korea for a while, and I was able to work together with some very interesting people who told me about this idea of the public space, right? Public space art. and in the most common way, that's an outdoor screen, or like very big screen where work is being shown. And I'm very interested in that field to use my work, which is very calm, to put that on those screens. So right now I'm developing a lot of different, no, not a lot. I'm developing 4 different pieces on the highest quality that I can get, and the goal is to get those on a lot of these very big screens. So that's what I'm working on right now. And there's also a website for a render farm that I love to use, and they asked me to work on their website. So that's the project I'm working on right now as well. And there's a fashion label from Amsterdam that recently started, and they're almost ready for production. And they asked me to work to create work for their t-shirts and hoodies. Those are the most current ones. But I think a little bit more context with that is that as an artist, you're trying to create a certain style. And after about, again, 2 years of working working on that style, I am now ready to really own that and only work in a very calm, relaxing, a lot of natural elements. So that's what I'm working on right now, defining the style and getting that to the highest level that I can.
All right, awesome. And all right, we talked a lot about like art stuff, art related stuff, but now I want to ask you this: what other hobbies or side projects or things you want to do you have in your life going on that are completely non art related? Maybe it's a skill you want to learn. Maybe it's just I don't know, just anything, any project that you might have that are completely non art related.
Yeah, there's no answer to that. I'm afraid if
Really?
you're a freelance artist, or at least in my case, it's hard not to think about the type of work you want to make, because you have to understand is that while I do have clients, I also have goals that are maybe not even professionally related, but I have a personal sort of intuition about where I want to go. So the only, let's say, hobby that I would ascribe myself to is thinking about where I want my life to go, and then doing the actions to get there. So for instance, right now I'm thinking about where to move to or where I want to live, because it has a lot of effect on who I am as a person. But again, then the art part sneaks in again as well. But for me personally, it's very important to stay uncomfortable. I don't want to be at a place where it's too where I have everything and where everything keeps repeating itself. So I am always looking for new challenges and opportunities, and traveling is a big part of that as well. So, but at the end of the day, it always sort of comes back to how can you sustain yourself financially and artistically and emotionally. And for me, the best way of doing that is to keep traveling as much as I can.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
And well, we've reached the final question and section of the podcast, which is called Time Capsule. And of course, the
Yeah.
name is kind of, the title of it is kind of self-explanatory, but let me explain.
Hmm.
If you had only a couple of minutes to distill and summarize some of the most important lessons you've learned in your life thus far, what would they be? Like, if you had, in this window of time, if you could summarize, like, like the most important things you've learned throughout life right now. And this question isn't about art, by the way. It's about just
Yeah.
the human experience. If you could tell us those, and to anyone else who might be listening to this podcast at any point of time in the future, what would they be? And just keep in mind that this podcast might be listened to in 200 years, 300 years, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe the
Yeah.
servers get destroyed in World War III and we won't, then this whole conversation might be pointless, but that's not the point. The point is, imagine like everything
Yeah.
will go well and they will open the archives of this little art podcast, Kouryer podcast, and they're listening to this and they see the time capsule part. What would you tell them?
Yeah. Well, what has brought me only value and never anything negative in my life is to stay true to yourself. And I mean that in the largest things in the world. So, what do you care about, and what makes you excited, what attracts you? But I also mean that in the way that you have to keep reflecting about where you're going in your life. So, it's very important to really look at yourself and tell yourself, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. These are my principles. And then just don't break them. and be very conscious about the fact is that once you broke a principle that you have, you will never be able to unbreak that. And I think it's very important to keep reflecting about where you are in your life and who you want to be, and sort of create a set of rules for yourself. And they don't have to be very strict. I mean, that doesn't mean that you need to have like 500 rules that you can never do this. I will never eat beans on Tuesday. They need to be a little bit more general. So one of the rules that helped me a lot is what I was talking about before, is splitting myself. Like, I don't want to get personal glory, I guess that's the word, from my work. I want to have professional success, which expresses itself in money, and it expresses itself in good professional relationships and getting invited. Like, for instance, this podcast for me is a professional achievement that you invited me here.
Oh, my
But
pleasure, man.
yeah, no, it's great.
Absolutely.
It's great.
That I
But
also really appreciate what you said. Thanks.
yeah, but then the personal part, this is also very important, and we shouldn't forget about that. My personal happiness does not come from my work. It comes from my friends and comes from my family, and it comes from people that I care about a lot. But it's sometimes in life it's not easy to combine those two things. But I think it's very important, at least for me, to split myself in half. When I'm working with clients, it's important for me to understand that they're paying for a professional service. And even though I'm friendly, there's a lot of sort of borders that we're not going to be able to cross. And on the other hand, I'd never want my professional success or failures to affect my personal life. I never want to be the type of artist who doesn't make any money and then he has to worry when he, wants to see a friend in another place. I don't have enough money for this trip. So it's important to split those two. For me, it's very important to split those two and make sure that there is a border between those two and that they don't interfere with each other. So that's my stay with yourself, trust yourself. You can do a
That's
lot.
good advice.
Yeah.
Pretty solid stuff. And yeah, it's kind of rare to see people having their own code of conduct these days, their personal code of conduct. And it comes down to the relationship people have with themselves, which most people really don't think about that much. It's mostly, and it's just because of the fact that most people try to get validation from externally, not internally. And it's a huge topic, but those are some really interesting points, actually. Do you want to add something?
For me, it's very important. I do get gratification and validation externally, just not from my work. So if my friends, I get them from my friends, I get them from my family. This is a very personal thing, but my beautiful middle sister, I have 3 sisters, she has a son, and I was gone for 4 months, and then I see him again, and then him and I eating dessert together. He's on my lap. We're just family again. This brings me an infinite more validation that I'm nice and that he's nice and we have a good relationship than any client will ever give me. But at the same time, if I would be stressed because of work or I'm doing something that I don't like or I'm like in a bad space professionally, I would not be able to enjoy this time that I have with my family and my friends properly. So it's like you said, making sure that you're honest about where your validation comes from. And if you love to work with very big brands and you think that this is where you get your validation from, then own that and make that a very specific goal in your life. But be honest with it. Like, I know that there are people when they get invited to a DJ set to create visuals for a DJ. This is a very big validation for them professionally, but also personally, and that's fine. Just be honest about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Honestly, great stuff. And
good.
Again, thanks so much for coming by for this podcast. I really hope you enjoyed your time here. And thank you to anyone who tuned in and listened to this episode as well. I hope you liked it as well. Leave a comment down below if you have any comments or suggestions or critiques as always. And by the way, where can people contact you if they had any questions? Is your Instagram okay?
Instagram is the best way.
All right, awesome. So you heard it. And yeah, that's about it. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Till next episode. Bye-bye.